Chapter 46 Unlimited Credit. About 2 o'clock the following day, a calash, drawn by a pair of magnificent English horses, stopped at the door of Monte Cristo, and a person dressed in a blue coat, with buttons of a similar color, a white waistcoat, over which was displayed a massive golden chain, brown trousers, and a quantity of black hair descending so low over his eyebrows as to leave it doubtful whether it were not artificial. So little did its jetty glossiness assimilate with the deep wrinkles stamped on his features. A person, in a word, who, although evidently past 50, desired to be taken for not more than 40, bent forward from the carriage door, on the panels of which were emblazoned the armorial bearings of a baron, and directed his groom to inquire at the porter's lodge whether the Count of Monte Cristo resided there, and if he were within. While waiting, the occupant of the carriage surveyed the house, the garden so far as he could distinguish it, and the livery of the servants who passed to and fro with an attention so close as to be somewhat impertinent. His glance was keen, but evincing rather cunning than intelligence. His lips were straight, and so thin that, as they closed, they were compressed within the mouth. His cheekbones were broad and projecting, and never failing proof of craftiness, while the flatness of his forehead, and the enlargement of the back of his skull, which extended beyond his large and vulgarly shaped ears, gave a repulsive look to this man, whom the mob admired for his fine horses, his diamond shirt studs, and the red ribbon that depended from his buttonhole. The groom tapped at the window of the porter's lodge, saying, "Pray, does not the Count of Monte Cristo live here?" "His Excellency does reside here," replied the concierge. "But," added he, glancing an inquiring look at Ali. Ali returned a sign in the negative. "But what?" asked the groom. "His Excellency does not receive visitors today." "Then take my master's card, Monsieur le Baron Danglars. Give the card to the Count, and say that, although in haste to attend the chamber, my master came out of his way to have the honor of calling upon him." "I never speak to His Excellency," replied the concierge. "The valet de chambre will carry your message." The groom returned to the carriage. "Well?" asked Danglars. Well, the man, somewhat crestfallen by the rebuke he had received, detailed to his master all that had passed between himself and the concierge. "Bless me," murmured Monsieur le Baron Danglars. "This must surely be a prince instead of a count by their styling him Excellency, and only venturing to address him by the medium of his valet de chambre. However, it does not signify. He has a letter of credit on me, so I must see him when he requires his money." Then, throwing himself back in his carriage, Danglars called out to his coachman, in a voice that might be heard across the road, to the Chambre des Députés. Apprised in the time of the visit paid him, Monte Cristo had, from behind the blinds of his pavilion, as minutely observed the baron by means of an excellent lorgnette as Danglars himself had scrutinized the house, gardens, and servants. "That fellow has a decidedly bad countenance," said the Count in a tone of disgust, as he shut up his glasses into its ivory case. How comes it that all do not recognize the snake in that flat forehead, the vulture in that bulging skull, and the buzzard in that sharp beak? "Ali!" cried he, striking at the same time on the brazen gong. Ali appeared. "Summon Bertuccio," said the Count. Almost immediately Bertuccio entered the apartment. "Did your Excellency desire to see me?" inquired he. "I did," replied the Count. "You no doubt observed the horses standing a few minutes since at the door?" "Certainly, your Excellency. I noticed them for their remarkable beauty." "Then how comes it," said Monte Cristo, with a frown, "that when I desired you to purchase for me the finest pair of horses to be found in Paris, He permitted so splendid a couple as those to be in the possession of any one but myself. At the look of displeasure, added to the angry tone in which the Count spoke, Ali turned pale and held down his head. "It is not your fault, my good Ali," said the Count in Arabic, and in a tone of such gentleness as none would have given him credit for being capable of feeling. "It is not your fault. You do not profess to understand the choice of English horses." The countenance of poor Ali recovered its serenity. "Permit me to assure your Excellency," said Bertuccio, "that the horses you speak of were not to be sold when I purchased yours." Monte Cristo shrugged up his shoulders. "It seems, Monsieur l'Intendant," said he, "that you have yet to learn that all things are to be sold to such as care to pay the price. Monsieur le Comte is not, perhaps, aware that Monsieur Danglars gave 16,000 francs for his horses. Very well, then offer him double that sum. A banker never loses an opportunity of doubling his capital." "Is your Excellency really in earnest?" inquired the steward. Monte Cristo looked at the steward as if astonished at his daring to question him. "I have to pay a visit this evening," replied he. "I desire that these horses, with completely new harness, may be at the door with my carriage." Bertuccio bowed and was about to retire, but when he reached the door he paused, and then said, "At what o'clock does your Excellency wish the carriage and horses ready?" "At 5 o'clock," replied the Count. "I beg your Excellency pardon," interposed the steward, in a deprecating manner, "for venturing to observe that it is already 2 o'clock." "I am perfectly aware of that fact," answered Monte Cristo calmly. Then, turning toward Ali, he said, "Let all the horses in my stables be led before the window of your young lady, that she may select those she prefers for her carriage. Request her also to oblige me by saying whether it is her pleasure to dine with me. If so, let dinner be served in her apartments. Now leave me, and desire my valet de chambre to come hither." Scarcely had Ali disappeared when the valet entered the chamber. "Monsieur Baptistin," said the Count, "you have been in my service 1 year, the time I generally give myself to judge of the merits or demerits of those about me. You suit me very well." Baptistin bowed low. "It only remains for me to know whether I also suit you." "Oh, Monsieur le Comte," exclaimed Baptistin, eagerly. "Listen, if you please, till I have finished speaking," replied Monte Cristo. "You have received 1,500 francs per annum for your service here, more than many a brave subaltern, who continually risks his life for his country, obtains. You live in a manner far superior to many clerks and policemen who work 10 times harder than you do. Then, though yourself a servant, you have other servants to wait upon you. Take care of your clothes and linen. Again, you make a profit upon each article you purchase of my toilet, amounting in the course of a year to a sum equaling your wages." "Nay, indeed, your Excellency." "I am not complaining about it, Monsieur Baptistin. It's only reasonable. But let it stop here. You will never find so lucrative a post as that you have now the good fortune to fill. I neither ill-use or ill-treat my servants by word or action. An error I readily forgive, but a wilful negligence or forgetfulness never. My commands are usually short, clear, and precise. I would rather be obliged to repeat my words twice, or even 3 times, than they should be misunderstood. I am rich enough to know whatever it is I desire to know, and I can promise you I am not wanting in curiosity. If, then, I should learn that you had taken upon yourself to speak of me to anyone, favorably or unfavorably, to comment on my actions or watch my conduct, that very instant you would quit my service. You may now retire. I never caution my servants a second time. You are cautioned. Go." Again Baptistin bowed reverentially, and was proceeding toward the door when the Count made him stay. "I forgot to mention to you," said he, I lay yearly aside a certain sum for each servant in my establishment. Those whom I am compelled to dismiss lose, as a matter of course, all participation in this money, while their portion goes to those who remain with me, and among whom it will be divided at my death. You have been in my service a year. Your fortune has commenced. Do not prevent its full accomplishment by your own folly." This address, delivered in the presence of Ali, who, not understanding one word of the language in which it was spoken, stood wholly unmoved, produced an effect on Baptistin only to be conceived by such as have occasion to study the character and disposition of French domestics. "I assure your Excellency," said he, "at least it shall be my study to merit your approbation in all things, and I will take Monsieur Ali as my model." "Pray do no such a thing," replied the Count, in a most frigid tone. "Ali has many faults mixed with excellent qualities. He cannot possibly serve you as a pattern, not being, as you are, a paid servant, but a mere slave, a dog, who, should he fail in his duty toward me, I should not discharge from my service, but kill." Baptistin opened his eyes with strong and unfeigned astonishment. "You seem incredulous," said Monte Cristo, who repeated to Ali in the Arabic language what he had just been saying to Baptistin in French. The Nubian smiled assentingly to his master's words, then, kneeling on one knee, respectfully kissed the hand of the Count. This corroboration of the lesson he had just received put the finishing stroke to the wonder and stupefaction of Baptistin. The Count then motioned the valet de chambre to retire, and to Ali to follow himself into his study, where they conversed long and earnestly together. As the hand of the pendule pointed to 5 o'clock, the Count struck thrice upon his gong. When Ali was wanted, 1 stroke was given, 2 summoned Baptistin, and 3 Bertuccio. The steward entered. "My horses," said Monte Cristo. "They are at the door harnessed to the carriage, as your Excellency desired. Does Monsieur le Comte wish me to accompany him?" "No, the coachman, Ali, and Baptistin will be sufficient." The Count descended, and beheld his carriage drawn by the very pair of horses he had so much admired in the morning as the property of Danglars. As he passed them, he said, "They are extremely handsome, certainly, and you have done well to purchase them, only you were slow about it." "Indeed, your Excellency, I had very considerable difficulty in obtaining them, and, as it is, they have cost an enormous price." "Are they on that account less beautiful?" inquired the Count, shrugging his shoulders. "Nay, if your Excellency is satisfied, all is as I could wish it. Whither does Monsieur le Comte desire to be driven?" "To the residence of Monsieur le Baron Danglars, Rue de la Chaussée-d'Antin." This conversation had passed as they stood upon the terrace, from which a flight of stone steps led to the carriage drive. As Bertuccio, with a respectful bow, was moving away, the Count called him back. "I have another commission for you, Monsieur Bertuccio," said he. "I am desirous of having an estate by the seaside in Normandy, for instance, between Havre and Boulogne. You see I give you a wide range. It will be absolutely necessary that the place you may select have a small harbor, creek, or bay, into which my vessel can enter and remain at anchor. She merely draws 15 feet water. She must be kept in constant readiness to sail immediately I think proper to give the signal. Make the requisite inquiries for a place of this description, and when you have met with an eligible spot, visit it, and if it possesses the advantage desires, purchase it at once in your own name. The corvette must now, I think, be on her way to Fécamp, must she not?" "Certainly, your Excellency. I saw her put to sea the same evening we quitted Marseille." "And the yacht?" "Was ordered to remain at Martigues." "'Tis well. I wish you to write from time to time to the captains in charge of the 2 vessels as to keep them on the alert." "And the steamboat? Has your Excellency any orders to give respecting her?" "She is at Chalons, is she not?" "She is, my lord." The directions I gave you for the other 2 vessels may suffice for the steamboat also. I understand, my lord, and will punctuality fulfill your commands. When you have purchased the estate I desire, I meant to establish constant relays of horses at 10 leagues distance, one from the other along the northern and southern road. Your Excellency may fully depend upon my zeal and fidelity in all things. The Count gave an approving smile, descended the terrace steps, and sprang into his carriage, which, drawn by the beautiful animals at a brisk trot, stopped only before the hotel of the banker. Danglars was engaged at that moment, presiding over a railroad committee, but the meeting was nearly concluded when the name of his visitor was announced. As the Count's title sounded on his ear, he rose, and addressing his colleagues, many of whom were members of either chamber, he said, "Gentlemen, I must pray you to excuse my quitting you thus, but a most ridiculous circumstance had occurred, which is this: Thomson and French, the bankers at Rome, have sent to me a certain Count of Monte Cristo, and have opened for him an unlimited credit. I confess this is the drollest thing I have ever met with the course in my foreign transactions, and you may suppose it has roused my curiosity. I took the trouble this morning to call on the pretended Count. Zeal counts nowadays are not famous for their riches. But my fine gentleman did not receive visitors. He gives himself the airs of a prince or a beauty. The house in the Champs-Élysées is his own property, and certainly it was very decently kept up. But, pursued Danglars, with one of his sinister smiles, an unlimited credit calls for something like caution on the part of the banker to whom that order is given. I am very anxious to see the man. I suspect a hoax. But the good folks knew but little whom they had to deal with. They laugh best who laugh last. Having delivered himself of this address, uttered with an energy that left him almost out of breath, the Baron bowed to the party and withdrew to his drawing-room, whose fitting up of white and gold had caused a sensation in the Chaussee d'Antin. It was to this apartment he had desired his guest to be shown to dazzle him. At the start he found the Count standing before some copies of Albano and Fator that had been passed off to the banker as originals, but which, copies as they were, disagreed with the gaudy gilding that covered the ceiling. The Count turned round as he heard the entrance of Danglars into the room, with a slight inclination of the head. Danglars signed to the Count to be seated, pointing significantly to a gilded armchair, covered with white satin, embroidered with gold. The Count obeyed. "I have the honor, I presume, of addressing Monsieur de Monte Cristo?" The Count bowed. "Am I of speaking to Baron Danglars, Chevalier de la Légion d'Honneur, and member of the Chamber of Deputies?" With an air of extreme gravity, Monte Cristo slowly enumerated the various titles engraved on the card left at his hotel by the Baron. Danglars felt all the irony contained in the address of his visitor. For a minute or two he compressed his lips as though seeking to conquer his rage ere he trusted himself to speak. Then, turning to his visitor, he said, "You will, I trust, excuse my not having called you by your title when I first addressed you, but you are aware that we are living under a popular form of government, that I am myself a representative of the liberties of the people." "So much so," replied Monte Cristo, "that while preserving the habit of styling yourself Baron, you have lost that of styling others Count." "Upon my word," said Danglars, with affected carelessness, "I attach no sort of value to such empty distinctions. But the fact is, I was made Baron, and so Chevalier de la Légion d'Honneur, in consequence of some services I had rendered the government. But you have abdicated your titles, after the example set you by Messrs. de Montmorency and Lafayette. It was a good example to follow." Why, replied Danglars, not altogether, with the servants, for instance. I see. For your domestics you are my lord, for the journalist, monsieur, and for your constituents, citizen. Again Danglars bit his lips with baffled spite. He saw well enough that he was no match for Monte Cristo in an argument of this sort, and he therefore hastened to turn to subjects more familiar to him. Monsieur le Comte, said he, bowing, I have received a letter of advice from Thomson and French. I am glad to hear it, Monsieur le Baron, for I must claim the privilege of so addressing you as well as your servants. I have acquired the bad habit in a country where barons are still met with, simply because none are ever made. But as regard the letter of advice, I am charmed to find it as has reached you. That will spare me the task of coming to you myself, which is always disagreeable. You have received a regular letter of advice, you say. There is one slight difficulty, said Danglars, and that consists in my not precisely comprehending the letter itself. Indeed, for that reason I did myself the honor of calling upon you, in order to beg you would explain some part of it to me. With much pleasure. I am here, all attention. Why, said Danglars, in the letter I believe I have it about me. Here he felt in his breast pocket. Yes, here it is. Well, this letter gives Monsieur le Comte de Monte Cristo unlimited credit on our house. And that is there, and what is there that requires explaining in that, Monsieur le Baron? Merely the term unlimited, nothing else. Is not that word French? The writers, you know, are Anglo-Germans. Oh, as for the composition, there is no error, but as regards the competency of the document, I certainly have doubts. Is it possible, asked the Count, assuming an air and tone of utmost simplicity and candor, is it possible that Thomson and French are not looked upon as safe? That would make me feel uneasy, having some property in their hands? Perfectly safe, replied Danglars, with an almost mocking smile, but the word unlimited, in financial affairs, is so extremely vague a term, that, in fact, said Monte Cristo, that is unlimited. Precisely what I was about to say, cried Danglars. Now, what is vague is doubtful, and, says the wise man, where there is doubt there is danger. Meaning to say, rejoined Monte Cristo, that however Thomson and French may be inclined to commit acts of imprudence and folly, Monsieur le Baron Danglars is not disposed to follow their example. How so, Monsieur le Comte? Simply thus. The banking house of Thomson and Company set no bounds to their engagements, while that of Monsieur Danglars has its limits. Truly he is wise as the sage he quoted just now. Monsieur, replied the banker, drawing himself up with a haughty air, my capitals or solvency has never been questioned. It seems, then, reserved for me, said Monte Cristo coldly, to be the first to do so. By what right, sir? By right of the explanations you have demanded, which certainly imply hesitation. Danglars bit his lips at the second defeat by an adversary who calmly fought him with his own weapons. He forced politeness, sat awkwardly upon him, and approached at times almost to impertinence. Monte Cristo, on the contrary, preserved a graceful demeanor, aided by a certain degree of simplicity he could assume at pleasure, and thus possessed an infinite advantage. Well, sir, resumed Danglars, after a brief silence, I will endeavor to make myself understood by requesting you to inform me for what sum you propose to draw upon me. Why, truly, replied Monte Cristo, determined not to lose an inch of the ground he had gained. My reason for desiring an unlimited credit was precisely because I did not know what money I might expend. The banker now thought it his turn to get the upper hand. Flinging himself back, therefore, in his armchair, he said with an arrogant air, Do not hesitate in naming your wishes. You will then be convinced that resources of the House of Danglars, however limited, are still equal to meeting the largest demands, and were you even to require 1,000,000— I beg your pardon, interposed Monte Cristo. I said 1,000,000, replied Danglars, with a pompous air. 1,000,000, retorted the Count. And what could I do with 1,000,000, my dear sir? If 1,000,000 could suffice me, I should never have given myself the trouble of opening an account for so contemptible an amount. 1,000,000! Excuse my smiling when you speak of a sum I am in the habit of carrying in my pocket-book or dressing-case. And with these words, Monte Cristo took from his pocket a small case containing his visiting cards, and drew forth 2 orders on the treasury for 500,000 francs each, payable at sight to the bearer. A knock-down blow, not a prick, is needed for men like Danglars, and its effect on the banker was perfectly stunning. His head felt giddy, and he stared with dull, dilated eyes at the Count. Come, come, said Monte Cristo. Confess that you have not confidence in the house of Thomson and French. There is nothing very strange in that. However, foreseeing that such might be the case, I took my precautions, although not a man of business. See, here are 2 similar letters to that you have yourself received. The one from the house of Arsten and Excos of Vienna, to Baron de Rothschild. The other drawn from Baring of London to Monsieur Laffitte. Now, sir, say the word, and I will spare you all uneasiness by presenting my letter of credit at one or other of these establishments. The blow had struck home, and Danglars was vanquished. With a trembling hand he took these 2 letters from Vienna and London from the Count, who held them carelessly between his fingers and thumb. Having carefully verified the signatures with a scrutiny which might have appeared insulting to the Count, had it not suited his present purpose to mislead the banker in every respect. Well, sir, said Danglars, rising, as though in adoration of the power of gold, personified in the man before him, 3 unlimited credits on our 3 banks, while ceasing all mistrust. Pardon me, Monsieur le Comte, for confessing the most extreme astonishment. Nay, nay, answered Monte Cristo, with the easiest air. 'Tis not for such sum as these to astonish the banking house of Monsieur le Baron Danglars. You can, then, let me have some money? By all means, Monsieur le Comte. What sum do you want? Why, replied Monte Cristo, since we mutually understood each other, for such I presume is the case. Danglars bowed assentingly. You are quite sure that not a lurking doubt or suspicion lingers in your mind? Oh, Monsieur le Comte, exclaimed Danglars, I never for an instant entertained such a feeling toward you. No, no, you merely wished to be convinced. But now that we have come to an understanding, you have lost all distrust. We may as well fix a sum for the first year. Suppose we say 6,000,000 to— 6 millions, gasped out Danglars. Certainly, whatever you please. Then if I should require more, continued Monte Cristo, in a careless, indifferent manner, why, of course, I should draw upon you, but my present intention is not to remain in France more than a year, and during that period I scarcely think I shall exceed the sum I mentioned. However, we shall see. Let me have 500,000 francs sent to me tomorrow, to begin with. I shall be at home till noon, and if not, will leave a receipt with my steward. The money you desire shall be at your house by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, Monsieur le Comte, replied Danglars. How would you like to have it, in gold, silver, or notes? Half in gold, and the other half in banknotes, if you please, said the Count, rising from his seat. I must confess to you, Monsieur le Comte, said Danglars, that I have hitherto imagined myself acquainted with the great fortunes of Europe, and still, wealth such as yours has been wholly unknown to me. May I presume to ask whether you have long possessed it? It has been in the family a very long while, returned Monte Cristo. a sort of treasure expressly forbidden to be touched for a certain period of years, during which the accumulated interest has trebled the capital. The period appointed by the testator for the disposal of these riches occurred only a short time ago, and they have only been employed by me within the last few years. Your ignorance on the subject, therefore, is easily accounted for. However, you will be better informed as to me and my possessions ere long. And the Count, while pronouncing these latter words, accompanied them with one of the ghastly smiles that used to strike terror into Franz d'Épinay. With your tastes and means of gratifying them, continued Danglars, you exhibit a splendor that must effectually put us poor miserable millionaires quite to the background. If I mistake not, you are an admirer of paintings. At least, I judge so from the attention you appeared to be bestowing on mine when I entered the room. If you will permit me, I shall be happy to show you my picture gallery, composed entirely of works by the ancient masters, warranted as such. I cannot endure the modern school. You are perfectly right in objecting to them, for this one great fault, that they have not yet had time to become old. Or will you allow me to show you several fine statues by Thorwaldsen, Bartolini, and Canova, all foreign artists? For, as you may perceive, I do not appreciate French sculptors. You have a right to be unjust to your own countrymen, if such is your pleasure. But all this can wait until another opportunity, when we shall be better known to each other. For the present, I will confine myself, if perfectly agreeable to you, to introducing you to Madame la Baronne Danglars. Excuse my impatience, Monsieur le Comte, but a person of your wealth and influence cannot receive too much attention. Monte Cristo bowed, in a sign that he accepted the proffered honor, and the financier immediately rang a bell, which was answered by a servant in a showy livery. "Is Madame la Baronne at home?" inquired Danglars. "Yes, Monsieur le Baron," answered the man. "And alone?" "No, Monsieur le Baron. Madame has visitors." "Have you any objection to meet any person who may be with Madame, or do you desire to preserve a strict incognito?" "No, indeed," replied Monte Cristo with a smile. "I do not arrogate to myself the right of doing so." "And who is with Madame?" "Monsieur Debray?" inquired Danglars, with an air of indulgence and good nature that made Monte Cristo smile, acquainted as he was with the secret of the banker's domestic life. "Yes, Monsieur le Baron," replied the servant. "Monsieur Debray is with Madame." Danglars nodded his head, then, turning to Monte Cristo, said, "Monsieur Lucien Debray is an old friend of ours, and private secretary to the Minister of the Interior. As for my wife, I must tell you, she lowered herself by marrying me, for she belongs to an ancient family. Her maiden name was de Servières, and her first husband was Monsieur le Colonel Marquis de Nargonne. I have not the honor of knowing Madame Danglars, but I have already met Monsieur Lucien Debray." "Ah, indeed," said Danglars. "And where was that?" "At the house of Monsieur de Morcerf." "Oh, what? You are acquainted with the young Viscount, are you?" "We were together a good deal during the carnival at Rome." "True, true," cried Danglars. "Let me see. Have I not heard talks of some strange adventure with bandits hid in ruins, and of his having a miraculous escape? I know he used to amuse my wife and daughter by telling them about it after his return from Italy." "Madame la Baronne is waiting to receive you, gentlemen," said the servant who had gone to inquire the pleasure of his mistress. "With your permission," said Danglars, bowing, "I will precede you, to show you the way." "By all means," replied Monte Cristo. "I follow you."